Juan Diaz for the NCGR board, and I'm talking today with one of our Baltimore 2019 speakers, Adam Elenbaas. Adam, it's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Armand. I'm excited to see everyone in Baltimore.
Really looking forward to it. I'm going to read the title of your talk. I know what it is, but it's a mouthful, so I'm going to come out and actually read it over here. I'll turn my head and say the title of your talk, which it's on Saturday, August 31st. It's one of the first talks. It's at 2:30 p.m. The title of the talk is Karma, Enlightenment, and the Influence of Eastern Philosophy on the History of Western Astrology.
There it is. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Oh, by the time you read out the topic, you'll be
It's over. Yeah.
So here's the thought that I had with that, and that is you're talking about the history of Western astrology, and I think a lot of people look at Eastern ideas and say, well, yeah, that's something that's been big since like the 90s, like maybe an evolutionary astrology thing. Like we like astrology, we like Eastern philosophy, but the idea is that maybe these are sort of a new hybrid. You're saying not so much so.
Yeah, that's right. I think the purpose of the talk is to really trace out the history of the influence of Eastern philosophy and Eastern ideas within the Western esoteric history of astrology, and really taking a look at how commingled so many metaphysical ideas were during the Hellenistic period of astrology. That it's kind of the early founding period of astrology. There was so much exchange between East and West, and I think part of the purpose of the talk is to really expose people to how interconnected East and Western esotericism is, but also trying to also disentangle some ideas and show which ones come a little bit more from the West and which ones a little bit more from the East.
That's a fascinating notion. I mean, I think that we can trace back. I mean, there was the whole Alexandrian period when Alexander went out to India and so on. And we recognize that Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy have intermingled. I don't think that we've done a great job of looking at how that's influenced astrology or how that influenced astrology.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm really excited about these days, because, we live right near Baltimore. My wife and I are just outside of DC, and we have a yoga studio in DC. And so we've been committed to the yogic path for a while. And in studying, in studying the history of yoga philosophy and the sort of Vedic civilization, and then also sort of developing more of an education in the Hellenistic roots of astrology, you see how similar so many of the world cosmologies and metaphysical views were. And so I think it's, for me, the connection between the two has been really natural. But I was also really surprised to hear, many of my students who come into my programs for learning about astrology for the first time, there's such a jumble of Eastern and Western ideas. And I think it's really helpful to kind of parse out, well, this one actually comes a little bit more from this, and this idea about reincarnation really has its roots over here. This is how they blend. But just sort of looking at all the interconnected wires and sorting them out a little bit. For me, it was a process that was really clarifying and helpful for my practice.
Yeah. So here's a thing that maybe people will have this question, or maybe I have this question. If we're looking at Eastern ideas and Western astrology, are we looking then at Indian astrology, Vedic, Jyotish type of thing, or are we looking at Eastern ideas coming into Western philosophy and then astrology?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really, I think what we're looking at is what are the foundational ideas and beliefs that astrologers in both the East and the West shared in the earliest dawn of astrology. So, for example, many, like whether you're looking at the Pythagoreans or Platonists or Hermeticists, or if you're looking at early Christian astrologers, and also you could kind of compare what they were doing to looking at what early Indian and Vedic civilization was teaching through the Upanishads, through the Vedas, and so forth. You find that there's so many things that there's so many similarities. For example, the idea of that astrology is a practice that participates in the liberation of the soul from material bondage, the tendency for the soul to come into matter and then get overly identified with it, and then sort of caught in the wheel of karma or time, or becoming kind of forgetting our spiritual nature. And that philosophers in both the East and the West really prioritized that idea in the way that they were doing and looking at astrology.
So the last question I would have for you is, this might sound to some people like this is going to be the sort of, you'd have to have a great basis in Eastern Eastern thought or something like that in order to appreciate it. Is that the case, or is this?
No, definitely not. I mean, the whole purpose of the talk is definitely to give you, like, here are the 10 most basic sort of metaphysical, religious, spiritual values that Western philosophers had, and look at how incredibly similar they are to the values and beliefs that Eastern philosophers had. And then some speculation about how some of the ideas sometimes get conflated with one another when they're actually a little bit different. For example, how Western philosophers look at the process of the liberation of the soul and reincarnation compared to how Eastern philosophers did. There's some really interesting differences, and I try to make the talk both comparative but also sort of a compare and contrast, and do it as simple as possible for people who, may not really feel like I'm the kind of person who wants to dig into all this philosophical, the academic research portion of it.
It sounds absolutely fascinating, and we'll look forward to seeing you in Baltimore.
Yeah, you bet. I look forward to it.